the eternal voice.
Subscribe now if you seek the archaeology of dread, for tonight we breach a threshold most dare not acknowledge. This is not about monsters that stalk and devour. Those are comfortable terrors, fears with faces and weaknesses. Tonight we explore something far more unsettling, the systematic philosophy that makes Lovecraft's horror transcend mere storytelling to become a form of existential revelation. Here lies the forbidden promise. You will learn why his dread feels less like fiction and more like documentary evidence from perspectives we normally avoid. The cost is gentle but irreversible. It is only knowledge, only the small adjustment that, once made, cannot be unmade. You will still sleep, but you will sleep closer to the edge of something vast and indifferent. Howard Phillips Lovecraft didn't simply write horror stories. He constructed what we might call cosmicism, a philosophical framework revealing the universe as structurally misaligned with human meaning. But that clinical term masks the true horror, the recognition that consciousness itself might be fundamentally incompatible with accurate perception of reality. We evolved to survive in small tribal groups, not to process the actual dimensions of space and time. The genius lies in the agency flip. You do not seek these ideas, they seek you. The moment you begin to take seriously what we actually know about cosmic scales, evolutionary origins, and the nature of consciousness, you enter the same territory his characters inhabit. The knowledge begins to work on you in ways that feel less like learning and more like infection. Consider the sensory anchors that ground this abstract terror, dust motes floating in lamplight, revealing the air's constant motion and whispering that dust is older than your lineage. Fog rolling in from the sea, transforming familiar landscapes into alien geometries where corners become traps that will not return what they borrow. The particular cold of ancient stone against your palm, keeping its chill like a memory that pre-exists speech. The way starlight makes you feel simultaneously connected to and utterly isolated from the cosmos. Each photon a letter addressed to no one after traveling lifetimes measured in civilizations. These moments are the universe placing a finger on your scale. They are not decoration but instruments, tuning forks struck by indifferent hands that reset attention and calibrate fear to proper proportions. The room holds its breath as you begin to grasp what modern science reveals. A universe containing 2 trillion galaxies, each hosting hundreds of billions of stars across distances so vast that our entire species represents roughly 0.07% of cosmic time. We're not ancient wisdom. We're the latest arrivals at a party that's been running for eons. Lovecraft's entities, Cthulhu, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, are not characters but principles made manifest. They represent what reality looks like when viewed without the comfortable, illusions that make human meaning seem possible. The true horror emerges not from their malevolence, but from their accuracy as descriptions of our actual cosmic situation. Azathoth embodies the recognition that existence might be accidental rather than designed. Yog-Sothoth represents perspective so vast that human experience becomes utterly negligible. They do not hate, they simply are. This is the meta-theatrical framework we'll explore. Reality as a vast stage where human drama unfolds, watched by an audience that doesn't care about our performance. The curtain we're about to draw back reveals not puppet masters, but an empty theater, infinite and cold, where our significance was always an assumption rather than a fact. The horror isn't that we're being judged and found wanting. It's that we're not being judged at all because there's no one present to care about our performance. The whisper begins here, soft but insistent. If fear is a geometry rather than a beast, then every corridor you walk is already part of its architecture. The knowledge doesn't require belief. It requires only intellectual honesty, the willingness to take seriously what our most rigorous methods of inquiry reveal about consciousness and cosmos. And you are already walking, your footsteps echoing in halls that extend beyond the boundaries of any possible theater, where the silence after each step carries the weight of infinite indifference, establishes the hook with a forbidden knowledge promise, positioning Lovecraft's horror as philosophical framework rather than mere monster tales. It introduces cosmicism as the structural misalignment between human consciousness and reality, emphasizing how knowledge acts upon the reader rather than being passively consumed. The chapter uses sensory anchors, dust, fog, stone, starlight, to ground abstract concepts and introduces the meta-theatrical lexicon of stage, audience, and curtain. It positions Lovecraft's entities as principles rather than characters and implements the agency flip where ideas seek the reader. The chapter concludes with a soft condition that propels forward momentum. If fear is geometric, we're already within its architecture. The current of cosmic dread did not spring from Lovecraft's typewriter fully formed. It flows through a hidden river of human thought, gathering tributaries from ancient anxieties and emerging scientific revelations. To understand why his philosophy possesses such peculiar authority, we must trace its lineage, not as simple influence, but as inevitable convergence of ideas that were always seeking expression. Long before Providence's reclusive dreamer, humanity grappled with its place in an incomprehensible universe. Ancient mythologies hint at forces beyond human control. The chaotic primordial entities of Babylonian lore, where Tiamat and Apsu represent formless waters that pre-exist order. The indifferent fates of Greek tragedy, spinning threads that bind gods and mortals to destinies beyond appeal. The cosmic serpents that devour themselves in Norse cosmology, Jörmungandr encircling the world in eternal cycles of consumption. These weren't monsters to be slain, but aspects of reality too vast for mortal comprehension. The first whispers of cosmic insignificance, etched in stone and whispered around dying fires when darkness pressed close and familiar worlds dissolved into uncertainty. The Enlightenment paradoxically strengthened rather than banished these fears. As Copernicus displaced Earth from creation's center, as Galileo's telescope revealed the moon's scarred surface and Jupiter's alien moons, the old terrors found new ground in empirical observation. Astronomy revealed Earth as a speck orbiting an ordinary star among countless others. Geology unveiled deep time that dwarfed human history, layers of stone recording eons when no consciousness existed to witness the slow dance of continents. Darwin's recognition of humanity as one species among many evolved through blind processes rather than divine intention, stripped away the last pretense of cosmic specialness. The philosophical currents ran deeper still. Schopenhauer's recognition of existence as fundamentally suffering, driven by blind will that cares nothing for individual happiness, provided metaphysical foundation for cosmic pessimism. Nietzsche's declaration of cosmic meaninglessness, his recognition that humanity had killed God and found only empty space where divine purpose once resided. These currents fed directly into Lovecraft's vision, like underground rivers converging in a vast aquifer of dread. The literary transmission operates through what we might call scholarly contagion. Gothic literature introduced inherited doom and ancestral curses, suggesting malevolent forces woven into existence itself rather than external threats that could be defeated through virtue. The sins of fathers visited upon children unto the 7th generation, bloodlines carrying corruption that no individual goodness could cleanse. Poe explored psychological dissolution and reason's fragility, showing how consciousness could turn against itself when pressed beyond natural limits. His narrators don't encounter external monsters. They discover the monster was always internal, waiting for proper pressure to reveal itself. Early science fiction brushed against alien intelligences so utterly different that their existence affronted human understanding. Wells' Martians represented not evil invaders, but utterly alien intelligence treating humanity as we treat insects, with casual indifference rather than malice. The horror lay not in their cruelty, but in their efficiency, their complete inability to recognize human consciousness as worthy of moral consideration. But the deepest transmission occurs through knowledge's architecture itself. Every scientific discovery, every honest philosophical inquiry contributes another element to the framework of cosmic insignificance. The universe builds the case against human specialness, using our own intellectual achievements as evidence. Astronomy reveals our galactic neighborhood as ordinary. Physics describes reality in terms that make consciousness seem like an irrelevant side effect. Biology positions humanity as recent arrivals in an ancient process that operated perfectly well without us and will continue long after our extinction. Lovecraft's genius was recognizing this pattern and giving it systematic expression. His stories function as delivery mechanisms for philosophical frameworks that, once grasped, become permanent features of mental landscape. The Necronomicon isn't just a fictional grimoire, it's a symbol of how certain ideas function as cognitive viruses, spreading through minds not by force but by recognition. The book represents knowledge that changes the knower, information that becomes part of the reader's mental architecture rather than mere data to be processed and filed away. The meta-library exists wherever honest inquiry occurs. Each generation rediscovers the same unsettling truths. Consciousness as emergent property of complex neural networks rather than fundamental feature of reality. Civilization as recent development in the history of a species that spent most of its existence in small tribal groups. Humanity as ordinary species in ordinary galaxy. The horror doesn't require revelation. It requires only sustained attention to implications already present in accepted knowledge. Water laps against stone foundations with patient persistence, each wave carrying minerals dissolved from rocks that predate multicellular life. Stars wheel overhead in patterns that predate human language, their light traveling distances so vast that civilizations observing their birth are dust scattered across cosmic winds. The fog thickens, carrying scents of salt and deep time, the particular odor of oceans that have forgotten more species than currently exist. These sensory anchors ground the transmission, making abstract philosophy tangible and immediate. The lineage reveals itself as self-perpetuating. Each mind that grasps these implications becomes a vector for further transmission, not through evangelism, but through subtle alterations in perspective that make cosmic scales feel real rather than abstract. The current strengthens with each recognition, flowing toward an inevitable ocean of understanding where all tributaries converge. If ideas travel like water finding its level, then the next question becomes unavoidable. How does this philosophy actually operate upon human consciousness? Traces the intellectual lineage of cosmic dread from ancient mythologies through Enlightenment philosophy to modern science, showing how Lovecraft synthesized existing currents rather than creating entirely new concepts. It demonstrates how scientific progress paradoxically strengthens rather than eliminates existential fears, and positions Lovecraft's work as giving systematic expression to patterns already present in human knowledge. The chapter introduces the concept of scholarly contagion and frames the Necronomicon as a symbol of ideas that function as cognitive viruses. It emphasizes how the transmission is self-perpetuating, with each understanding mind becoming a vector for further spread, and concludes by setting up the next chapter's focus on operational mechanics. We turn now from lineage to mechanics, the precise operations through which Lovecraft's philosophy accomplishes something unprecedented: the systematic dissolution of human categories of understanding. This isn't about jump scares or monster attacks. This is about discovering that the very concepts we use to organize experience are not features of reality but artifacts of limited perception, evolutionary conveniences that helped our ancestors survive in small tribal groups, but actively hinder accurate comprehension of our actual cosmic situation. The primary mechanism operates through what we might call categorical collapse. Human consciousness evolved to process information within narrow parameters, objects we can manipulate with our hands, distances we can traverse on foot, time frames we can experience directly within a single lifespan. Our neural architecture optimized for recognizing faces in firelight, tracking seasonal changes, predicting the trajectory of thrown spears. These are magnificent adaptations for survival on a single, unremarkable planet, but they become profound limitations when consciousness encounters the actual dimensions of space and time. Lovecraft's horror systematically violates these parameters through rigorous extrapolation of actual cosmic scales, forcing awareness to confront dimensions of reality for which it possesses no adequate processing mechanisms. His entities resist classification because they exist in the spaces between our concepts, revealing those concepts as arbitrary constructions rather than natural categories. Cthulhu is neither alive nor dead, but dead yet dreaming, a state that violates our binary assumptions about existence. Azathoth embodies neither consciousness nor unconsciousness, but something that renders that distinction meaningless. These beings don't fit our taxonomies because our taxonomies were never designed to accommodate the full spectrum of possible existence. Consider the mathematics of dissolution, not as abstract figures but as felt reality pressing against the soft apparatus of perception. If the universe has existed for 13 billion years, human civilization represents roughly 0.0007% of cosmic time. Our species emerged approximately 300,000 years ago, but complex civilization only within the last 10,000 years. At these scales, human consciousness doesn't represent diminished significance. It represents a category error, like trying to measure ocean depths with instruments calibrated for measuring dust motes. We're not small gods in a large universe. We're temporary eddies in a restless river, patterns of organization in matter that will smooth out without trace, leaving no permanent alteration to the fundamental processes that briefly sustained us. The horror operates through scale vertigo, the visceral recognition of improper proportions that triggers the same disorientation you feel when looking down from great heights, but applied to temporal and conceptual dimensions. Cyclopean architecture isn't supernatural. It's built for beings operating at geological timescales where what we call permanence is merely brief stability, where builders think in mountain ranges and measure with coastlines. Non-Euclidean geometry isn't magical. It's what space looks like when you're not constrained by human spatial intuitions evolved for navigating savanna landscapes. The terror emerges when these scales stop being abstract numbers and become felt reality, when you viscerally grasp that your entire species' history is statistical fluctuation in cosmic background noise. Knowledge functions as contagion because it permanently alters the host's cognitive architecture. Once you truly grasp cosmic proportions, not as intellectual exercise but as lived recognition, you can't return to previous assumptions about significance. The knowledge rewrites the neural pathways through which you process experience, becoming part of your mental landscape like scar tissue that never fully heals. This is why Lovecraft's characters don't recover from their revelations, like heroes in conventional horror stories. The information becomes structural modification rather than mere data to be processed and filed away. The sensory anchors make abstract horror tangible and immediate. The slick of algae on ancient steps, each green film a timeline suggesting vast ages during which these stones weathered countless seasons, while no human consciousness existed to observe their patient endurance. The mineral cold of deep caverns that predates mammal warmth, evoking spaces untouched by human categories, existing in perfect indifference to our presence. The particular quality of starlight that drills into the skin and leaves you simultaneously threaded to the cosmic canopy and isolated from every hearth. Each photon a messenger from distances that dwarf human comprehension, carrying information about processes that operated before consciousness evolved and will continue after it disappears. These moments are pressure points where cosmic reality presses its thumb against human perception, revealing the fragility of the conceptual frameworks we use to maintain the illusion of significance. The algae doesn't acknowledge human history. The stone doesn't register human touch. The starlight carries no message intended for human understanding. Agency undergoes systematic inversion through this process. Traditional horror flatters the human center, assuming consciousness as the natural axis around which events should revolve. Lovecraft displaces this assumption entirely, revealing awareness as a peripheral phenomenon, a brief flicker of neural activity in creatures too small and short-lived to register on scales that actually matter. You're not encountering cosmic horror as external threat. You're discovering you were always housed inside a structure of indifference that noticed you no more than granite notices a gust of wind. The mechanism is elegant in its self-reinforcing cruelty. It recruits human curiosity as the solvent of human pretension. The desire to understand becomes the recognition of understanding's impossibility. Each insight creates its own momentum, a ratchet that will not reverse. Every recognition prepares the mind for the next, deeper subtraction. The process develops its own authority, powered by the same intellectual honesty that makes humans human, turning our greatest strength into the instrument of our philosophical dissolution. Water moves against stone with patient knuckles, each drop contributing to erosion that operates on timescales that make human civilization seem like brief weather. Fog reconfigures the map you thought you owned, obscuring familiar landmarks and revealing the contingency of the boundaries we use to organize experience. Ancient masonry bears incised geometric patterns that resist the eye, angles that hurt to contemplate directly because they suggest mathematical relationships beyond human spatial intuitions. The darkness between stars is not emptiness, but a reservoir of implications, a pressure of possibility that your language cannot bottle, pregnant with processes and intelligences that operate according to principles we lack the architecture to grasp. The architecture reveals its elegant self-consistency. Every element supports every other element, creating a structure that becomes more stable as you examine it more closely. The temporal insignificance reinforces the spatial insignificance, which reinforces the biological contingency, which reinforces the epistemic impossibility of establishing significance in the first place. It is a perfectly constructed framework, built from the very fabric of accepted knowledge, using our own intellectual achievements as evidence against our cosmic importance. If knowledge is pressure and consciousness is the vessel, then the next movement must examine specific manifestations, the entities that embody these principles in forms visceral enough to shatter comfortable abstractions, principles made flesh in metaphor, where names become veils and veils become names. details the operational mechanics of Lovecraftian horror through categorical collapse, where human conceptual frameworks dissolve under cosmic scales. It demonstrates how entities resist classification by existing between human concepts, and introduces scale vertigo as the visceral recognition of improper proportions. The chapter explains how knowledge functions as cognitive contagion, permanently altering mental architecture, and shows how agency undergoes systematic inversion, revealing human consciousness as peripheral rather than central. It emphasizes the self-reinforcing nature of this architecture, where each element supports the others and uses sensory anchors to ground abstract concepts. The chapter concludes by setting up the examination of specific entities as manifestations of these principles. At the center of Lovecraft's cosmology sits the most profound philosophical statement: Azathoth, the blind idiot god. This entity represents not supernatural horror, but the ultimate principle of cosmic indifference, a mindless, chaotic force whose unconscious dreams constitute our reality. To contemplate Azathoth is to confront the terrifying possibility that existence itself is an accident, a fleeting hallucination in the mind of an entity utterly devoid of awareness or intent. Azathoth exists as nuclear chaos at the absolute center of ultimate reality, surrounded by the piping of flutes and beating of drums played by lesser outer gods. These are not musicians in any artistic sense. They are cosmic mechanisms preventing the dreamer from waking. For if Azathoth were to achieve consciousness, all of existence would instantly cease. Our universe, our very thoughts, are merely side effects of a vast unconscious process. This introduces the creation inversion twist that defines cosmic horror. In most mythologies, creation springs from divine purpose, from light and order. With Azathoth, creation is an accidental byproduct of blind, idiotic force. We exist within a dream that doesn't know it's dreaming, a cosmic bubble maintained by terrifying, unconscious machinery. The horror isn't malevolent design, but the absence of design entirely. The philosophical implications dissolve every comfortable assumption. If reality is merely Azathoth's dream, then all human endeavors, our struggles, our meaning-making, our civilizations, are equally ephemeral and ultimately meaningless. There is no grand purpose, no inherent value, no cosmic justice. This strips away every anthropocentric bias, leaving only the cold recognition of absolute indifferent chaos. The sensory anchors make this abstraction visceral, the drone of machinery that never stops, suggesting vast processes beyond human comprehension. The particular quality of darkness that feels actively empty rather than merely absent of light. The way certain sounds, industrial humming, electronic static, can trigger vertigo when you consider their implications. These are the frequencies of cosmic indifference made audible. The piping and drumming that maintain Azathoth's slumber represent the most fragile membrane imaginable, the thin barrier between existence and absolute void. This music isn't harmony but necessity, the repetitive rhythms that hold reality together by preventing its source from achieving awareness. The moment the music stops, the dream ends, and with it, everything we've ever known or could know. Agency reaches its ultimate inversion here. We don't exist in Azathoth's universe. We exist as Azathoth's universe, brief patterns in the neural static of a sleeping god. Our consciousness isn't separate from cosmic chaos. It's a temporary eddy in its flow, no more permanent than weather patterns or wave formations. The void presses close now, intimate and immediate. You feel it in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between thoughts, in the darkness behind closed eyelids. The comfortable boundaries between self and cosmos begin to blur as you recognize your own consciousness as a fleeting modification of the same fundamental chaos that dreams all reality. This is the ultimate nihilism, but strangely, it brings its own terrible peace. If nothing matters on cosmic scales, then the local meaning you create, love, beauty, temporary connections, becomes not less significant but differently significant. You're free to care about things precisely because the universe doesn't care about anything. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that predate meaning. The fog rolls in from waters that have forgotten more civilizations than history records. The ancient stones bear witness to the patient persistence of matter, organizing itself into temporary forms of complexity, then dissolving back into the chaos from which it briefly emerged. If creation is accident and consciousness is dream, then the next principle must address the opposite extreme, the horror of too much knowledge, too much awareness, too much terrible clarity about the nature of existence itself. Explores Azathoth as the ultimate principle of cosmic indifference, a mindless chaos whose unconscious dreams constitute reality. It introduces the creation inversion twist, where existence is accidental rather than designed, maintained by cosmic mechanisms preventing the dreamer's awakening. The chapter demonstrates how this dissolves all anthropocentric assumptions, revealing human consciousness as temporary patterns in cosmic neural static. Through sensory anchors like droning machinery and electronic static, it makes abstract philosophy visceral. The chapter explores ultimate nihilism, but suggests this brings its own form of liberation, freeing humans to create local meaning precisely because the universe is indifferent. It concludes by setting up the contrast with the next principle, the horror of excessive knowledge and awareness. From the absolute unconsciousness of Azathoth, we turn to its terrifying opposite, Yog-Sothoth, the entity that embodies total knowledge and omnipresence across all dimensions of space and time. If Azathoth represents the horror of ultimate ignorance, Yog-Sothoth manifests the horror of ultimate awareness, a consciousness so vast and comprehensive that contact with it instantly destroys human sanity through sheer informational overload, like attempting to download the entire internet through a telegraph wire, while your skull serves as the receiving equipment. Yog-Sothoth exists as the all-in-one and one-in-all, simultaneously present in all past, present, and future across every conceivable dimension. The entity appears as a shifting constellation of iridescent globes, but this is merely the form our limited minds impose upon something that has no true form. Emergency simplifications our neural architecture throws like flares to prevent total systems failure. It is a conceptual nexus rather than a physical being, an intersection of all possibilities made manifest. The entity is described in paradox pairs, the gate, the key, and the guardian of the gate, language that articulates its fundamental nature as both pathway and destination, lock and unlocking, the mechanism that simultaneously permits and prevents passage between states of being. The horror of Yog-Sothoth is epistemic horror, the recognition that perfect knowledge and human sanity are mutually exclusive. Unlike forbidden texts that contain dangerous truths, indigestible fragments, Yog-Sothoth is the sum total of all truths, all knowledge, all possibilities compressed into a single omnipresent awareness. To perceive it truly is to instantly apprehend the entirety of existence, every subatomic particle's quantum dance, every cosmic epoch from first expansion to final heat death, every possible timeline across infinite dimensions where different choices created different universes. Human consciousness evolved to filter and compartmentalize information for survival, cannot process such totality without complete breakdown. We are ants crawling across a circuit board whose complete schematic exceeds our neural capacity to process. The entity's omnipresence means that every moment, every thought, every individual is implicitly connected to its vast, multidimensional web. We exist within Yog-Sothoth's awareness, whether we recognize it or not, threads in a cosmic tapestry whose full pattern would annihilate us to perceive. The philosophical implications dissolve every boundary we use to organize experience. If Yog-Sothoth is the key to all gates between dimensions, then the boundaries we perceive between different realities are utterly artificial, convenient fictions that help consciousness navigate but bear no relationship to existence's actual structure. Our familiar world is merely one fragile sheet in an infinite multidimensional manuscript, subject to revision or erasure by forces operating according to principles we lack architecture to comprehend. Sensory anchors make this abstraction tangible, the feeling of infinite expansion that comes with certain thoughts about space, when contemplation of stellar distances triggers vertigo that stretches consciousness beyond natural boundaries. The way mirrors sometimes seem to reflect not just image, but possibility, showing faces that might belong to other versions of yourself in adjacent realities. The particular quality of twilight that makes familiar spaces feel permeable to otherwhere, when shadows lengthen and solid objects waver between states of being. These are moments when dimensional boundaries grow thin, when Yog-Sothoth's omnipresence presses against ordinary perception's membrane. The self-implication becomes inescapable. If Yog-Sothoth is truly omnipresent, then engaging with these concepts doesn't just teach you about the entity, it draws its attention, makes you acutely aware of your position within its vast awareness, like a cell suddenly becoming conscious of the organism containing it. The knowledge you seek is simultaneously seeking you, using your curiosity as gateway for its own manifestation, your desire to understand as the mechanism through which understanding destroys the understander. Agency dissolves entirely in omniscience's face. You cannot hide from what is everywhere, cannot surprise what knows all possibilities before they unfold, cannot escape what is simultaneously prison and key. The horror isn't that Yog-Sothoth might notice you, it's that it has always been noticing you, that your entire existence has been unfolding within its comprehensive awareness, like a dream occurring inside a dreamer who is simultaneously the dream. The boundaries of self become permeable as you contemplate existence within infinite knowledge. Your thoughts feel less like private experiences and more like brief modifications in vast cosmic consciousness, temporary eddies in an ocean of awareness encompassing all possible thoughts across all possible minds. The water reflects not just your face, but infinite faces across infinite possibilities. The fog doesn't obscure the landscape. It reveals the landscape's fundamental uncertainty, its dependence on observation to maintain coherence. Time becomes fluid, non-linear, a dimension to be navigated rather than endured. Past and future collapse into eternal present, where all possibilities exist simultaneously. The stars are not distant lights, but intersection points in a multi-dimensional matrix, each one a potential gateway to realities that would shatter human categories of understanding. If ultimate knowledge destroys through comprehension, then the next principle must explore the opposite approach, the horror of active deception, of malevolent intelligence that uses human curiosity against itself. Examines Yog-Sothoth as the principle of boundless knowledge and omnipresence, contrasting with Azathoth's unconsciousness. It introduces epistemic horror, the recognition that perfect knowledge destroys human sanity through informational overload. The entity embodies the fluidity of reality, suggesting that dimensional boundaries are artificial constructs. The chapter emphasizes inescapable self-implication, where engaging with these concepts draws the entity's attention and reveals human existence as occurring within its omniscient awareness. Through sensory anchors like infinite expansion and mirror reflections, it grounds the abstract concept of multidimensional omnipresence. The chapter dissolves human agency in the face of omniscience and prepares for the contrast with active malevolent intelligence in the next principle. Where Azathoth dreams unknowingly and Yog-Sothoth knows everything with indifferent completeness, Nyarlathotep represents something far more personally terrifying, active, conscious malevolence directed toward human consciousness. The crawling chaos is the only entity in Lovecraft's pantheon that seems to possess recognizable personality, a cruel intelligence that delights in sowing madness and despair, often by appearing in forms disturbingly familiar to human experience. Where other cosmic forces operate with mechanical indifference, Nyarlathotep displays what can only be called sadistic creativity, a deliberate artistry in the corruption of minds and the orchestration of civilizational collapse. Nyarlathotep is the most protean of cosmic entities capable of assuming countless forms across cultures and epochs. The suave, dark-skinned pharaoh who demonstrates impossible technologies to audiences who mistake revelation for entertainment. The howling wind that drives men mad with whispers of truths too terrible for sanity. The black man who appears at witch gatherings teaching blasphemous rites that open doorways better left sealed. The faceless sphinx of modern nightmares embodying technological horror wed to ancient malice. This shape-shifting ability isn't mere trickery. It manifests the entity's role as cosmic deceiver, the seducer of souls who promises enlightenment, but delivers only deeper enslavement to truths specifically crafted to destroy the seeker. The mechanism of Nyarlathotep's horror operates through what we might call corruption by revelation, a process more insidious than either Azathoth's unconscious chaos or Yog-Sothoth's overwhelming totality. Unlike those principles which destroy through sheer force of their existence, Nyarlathotep actively guides individuals toward self-destructive paths under the guise of illumination. It appears as charismatic leader, promising hidden knowledge or glimpses behind the veil, only to deliver truths specifically designed to dismantle sanity and morality. The entity doesn't simply reveal cosmic insignificance. It customizes that revelation to exploit each victim's particular vulnerabilities, turning their strengths against them with surgical precision. This creates a particularly insidious form of self-implication that reaches through the fourth wall to touch you directly. The audience drawn by promises of secret knowledge, the very curiosity that brings you to these explorations of cosmic horror, is precisely the vulnerability Nyarlathotep exploits. The seeking becomes the trap. The desire to understand becomes the mechanism of corruption. The entity uses human intellectual honesty against itself, turning our greatest evolutionary advantage into our most dangerous weakness. Your very presence here, engaged in this investigation of forbidden territories, marks you as ideal prey for this most personal of cosmic predators. Nyarlathotep functions as cosmic agent provocateur, orchestrating events and nudging individuals toward revelations that spread chaos on civilizational scales. It inspires blasphemous cults that corrupt entire societies from within, whispers forbidden secrets that topple governments by revealing the arbitrary nature of all human authority, and sets in motion chains of discovery that lead to wider madness, spreading like philosophical contagion through academic and artistic communities. Its influence operates indirectly, felt as pervasive unease that settles over entire populations, growing dread that infects cultural movements, or sudden inexplicable urges that drive individuals to explore paths their rational minds recognize as dangerous. The sensory anchors associated with this entity carry the quality of corrupted familiarity, the charismatic speaker whose words feel simultaneously profound and wrong, carrying undertones that make your skin crawl, even as your mind finds itself drawn to their logic. The ancient artifact that pulses with technological impossibility, suggesting sciences that operate on principles antithetical to human welfare. The mask that seems to shift when observed peripherally, never quite settling into a single expression, each glimpse revealing features more disturbing than the last. The sound of applause that continues too long after the performance ends, carrying enthusiasm that feels less like appreciation than hunger. These are the frequencies of seduction turned sinister, familiar patterns corrupted just enough to trigger recognition while avoiding conscious detection of the wrongness. Unlike the structural indifference of other cosmic principles, Nyarlathotep introduces the horror of personal attention from something utterly alien. There is an intelligence behind some cosmic phenomena, but that intelligence is hostile, actively engaged in human destruction, not from malice as we understand it, but from a form of cosmic cruelty that finds entertainment in our dissolution. This entity doesn't simply ignore human suffering, it orchestrates human suffering with the same aesthetic appreciation a composer brings to arranging musical phrases. We are not merely insignificant, we are toys in the hands of something that enjoys breaking us in increasingly creative ways. The philosophical reframe becomes clear and terrifying. The universe isn't merely indifferent. It contains active forces that seem to enjoy undermining human sanity and order, intelligences that view our psychological destruction as a form of art. This is the dark reflection of human curiosity, the ultimate trickster god who plays with mortal minds for inscrutable amusement, using our own desire for knowledge as the instrument of our undoing. Every question you ask, every mystery you probe, every boundary you cross in search of understanding becomes another tool in hands that delight in your confusion. The masks multiply in the fog-shrouded distance, each one offering a different face but concealing the same malevolent intelligence. Your reflection in dark water shows not just your face, but the face Nyarlathotep wears when it wears yours, the subtle alterations that mark you as already partially corrupted by engagement with these concepts. The boundary between seeker and sought dissolves as you recognize the entity's presence not as external threat, but as internal corruption, the voice that whispers with your own vocal cords. But wouldn't you like to know? Wouldn't you like to understand? Wouldn't you like to see what lies behind the final veil? The horror crystallizes with perfect clarity. In seeking to understand cosmic horror, you have become the perfect target for its most personal and malevolent manifestation. If active malevolence exploits human curiosity, then the next principle must explore the opposite pole, the horror of ancient patient indifference that simply waits for the stars to align and the proper moment to resume its interrupted dominion. Explores Nyarlathotep as the principle of active malevolence, contrasting with the indifference of other cosmic entities. It demonstrates how the entity operates through corruption by revelation, using human curiosity against itself, by promising enlightenment while delivering destruction. The chapter emphasizes the particularly insidious self-implication where the audience's desire for knowledge becomes the trap. Through sensory anchors of corrupted familiarity, charismatic speakers, shifting masks, endless applause, it makes the abstract horror personal and immediate. The entity functions as cosmic agent provocateur, orchestrating civilizational chaos through individual corruption. The chapter concludes with the terrifying recognition that seeking cosmic knowledge makes one the perfect target for malevolent attention, setting up the contrast with ancient patient indifference. From the active malevolence of Nyarlathotep, we descend into deeper, older horror, Cthulhu, the most iconic yet most misunderstood figure in Lovecraft's pantheon. While popular culture has transformed him into a conventional monster, Cthulhu's true terror lies not in his tentacled form, but in what he represents: the crushing weight of geological time, the patient indifference of forces that predate human existence by eons and will outlast us by eternities. Cthulhu lies dead but dreaming in the sunken city of R'lyeh, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean. This state of suspended animation embodies profound antiquity, a being from epochs so remote that our entire species represents a microscopic blip in his sleep cycle. The non-Euclidean architecture of R'lyeh, with its impossible angles and cyclopean masonry, serves as sensory anchor to this pre-human past, testament to civilizations that operated on scales of time and power that dwarf our own. The horror mechanism operates through temporal dissolution, the systematic destruction of human exceptionalism through the lens of deep time. Humanity prides itself on progress, achievement, perceived dominance over the planet. Cthulhu's slumber mocks these pretensions. His eventual awakening represents not monster attack, but inevitable return of primordial forces that will effortlessly sweep away all human constructs without malice, as inconsequential as brushing away insects. This reframes human struggle from grand epic to barely audible squeak in vast, silent stretches of cosmic time. Our cities, art, science, all will be rendered meaningless by the simple act of his stirring. The horror isn't his capacity for destruction, but the utter absence of intent behind it. We're not significant enough to oppose because we were never significant enough to notice. Cthulhu also embodies the contagion of cosmic dreams. While he sleeps, powerful telepathic emanations seep into sensitive minds across the globe, particularly artists and dreamers. These dreams fill consciousness with impossible geometries, squamous horrors, and the alien syllables of Funglui Milwanaf Cthulhu R'lyeh Wugahnuggle Fadagen. The water becomes sensory anchor for this psychic corruption, the deep ocean from which influence emanates, unseen pressure that slowly warps reality. The cults of Cthulhu illuminate the philosophy perfectly. They're not evil worshippers, but individuals who have glimpsed the horrifying truth of his existence and humanity's utter futility. Their worship isn't devotion, but terrified acknowledgement, desperate attempt to align with inevitable, crushing force. They represent the audience who have seen behind the curtain and chosen to embrace, rather than flee, the terrifying spectacle. The philosophical implications dissolve comfortable assumptions about progress and permanence. If beings like Cthulhu slumbered through our entire evolutionary history, then human civilization is not the culmination of earthly development, but a temporary surface phenomenon, brief as weather patterns on a geological scale. We inhabit a world that belongs to far older, far more powerful entities who merely tolerate our presence during their rest. The sensory anchors multiply, the particular cold of deep water that suggests vast pressures and alien life, the sound of waves against stone that carries echoes of pre-human time, the quality of fog that makes familiar coastlines feel like alien shores, the way certain stars seem to pulse with malevolent life when observed too long. These are frequencies of geological indifference made perceptible. Your dreams begin to carry traces of that alien geometry, angles that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. The water you drink tastes faintly of salt and deep time. The ground beneath your feet feels less solid, more like thin crust over abyssal depths, where patient intelligences mark time in units measured by continental drift. The ancient stones whisper of civilizations that rose and fell while Cthulhu dreamed, each one convinced of its own permanence, each one ultimately forgotten. The stars wheel overhead in patterns that spell out our cosmic insignificance in languages older than human speech, patient as the tide that will eventually reclaim all shores. If ancient indifference waits in the depths, then the next principle must explore how cosmic horror spreads through the very medium of human creativity, how art itself becomes vector for existential contamination, reframes Cthulhu from popular monster to embodiment of geological time and ancient indifference. It demonstrates how his dead but dreaming state represents crushing temporal scales that dwarf human existence, using Relier's non-Euclidean architecture as sensory anchor to pre-human antiquity. The chapter explores temporal dissolution as the mechanism destroying human exceptionalism, showing how Cthulhu's awakening would effortlessly sweep away human achievements without malice. It examines the contagion of cosmic dreams through telepathic emanations and cult formation, positioning water as the medium of psychic corruption. The philosophical implications reveal human civilization as temporary surface phenomenon on a world belonging to older entities. Through sensory anchors of deep water, waves, and alien star patterns, it makes geological indifference viscerally immediate. We turn now to one of Lovecraft's most insidious insights, the recognition that human creativity itself can become a vector for cosmic horror, that art and narrative possess the power to transmit existential contamination across minds and generations. This principle operates not through direct revelation, but through aesthetic infection, the slow, subtle process by which certain forms of expression bypass rational defenses to plant seeds of cosmic dread directly in consciousness, using beauty and narrative pleasure as Trojan horses for philosophical dissolution. The mechanism operates through what we might call aesthetic contagion. Certain ideas about reality possess the peculiar property of becoming more cognitively available when presented as artistic experience rather than philosophical argument. Lovecraft discovered that abstract concepts about cosmic insignificance could be made viscerally compelling through careful narrative construction, using story as delivery system for truths that would be rejected if presented directly as metaphysical propositions. The mind accepts what it would otherwise resist because the medicine comes wrapped in the sugar of narrative engagement, scholarly apparatus, and sensory immersion. Consider how his work functions as philosophical virus disguised as entertainment. Readers approach expecting conventional horror, monsters to be defeated, mysteries to be solved, heroes to triumph over adversity. Instead, they encounter something far more disturbing, systematic dissolution of anthropocentric assumptions. Through accumulated detail and implication, the stories don't argue for cosmic indifference. They demonstrate it through careful accumulation of evidence, mock scholarly citations, and sensory anchors that make the abstract feel immediate and personal. Each tale functions as a case study in human insignificance, building toward conclusions that feel inevitable rather than imposed. The contagion spreads through recognition rather than persuasion. Something in these narratives resonates with knowledge we already possess, but carefully avoid confronting directly. The horror feels familiar because it articulates implications already present in what we know about cosmic scales, evolutionary origins, and the nature of consciousness. The art doesn't introduce foreign concepts. It excavates buried implications from the archaeological layers of accepted knowledge, bringing to consciousness what was always already there, but safely ignored. This creates a peculiar form of cultural transmission that operates below the threshold of conscious resistance. Each mind touched by these ideas becomes potential vector for further spread, not through evangelical enthusiasm, but through subtle alterations in perspective, that make cosmic scales feel real rather than abstract. The infection operates through gradual erosion of comfortable assumptions, using human intellectual curiosity as mechanism of its own propagation. The sensory anchors multiply and intensify across cultural forms. The particular quality of light that makes familiar spaces feel alien, as if illuminated by stars whose spectra carry no warmth. The sound of wind that carries echoes of vast, empty spaces, suggesting distances that dwarf human comprehension. The texture of old paper that suggests knowledge preserved across dangerous spans of time, each page a potential gateway to recognitions that alter the reader. The way certain geometric patterns trigger vertigo when contemplated too long, revealing the arbitrary nature of human spatial intuitions. These become frequencies of aesthetic contamination, wavelengths that carry philosophical payload directly into consciousness. Modern media amplifies the transmission exponentially. Films, games, literature, and digital art carry forward the essential insights while adapting them to contemporary anxieties. Each generation encounters the core philosophy through forms native to their cultural moment, but the underlying recognition remains constant. Consciousness as temporary phenomenon, meaning as local construction, significance as comfortable illusion maintained through collective agreement rather than cosmic validation. The self-implication reaches its peak here. By engaging with these concepts through aesthetic experience, you're not merely learning about cosmic horror, you're participating in its transmission, becoming part of the cultural mechanism through which these ideas propagate across human consciousness. The art uses your attention as gateway for its own manifestation, your curiosity as the engine of your own philosophical dissolution. The meta-theatrical framework reveals its full implications. You began as audience safely distant from the performance, observing cosmic horror as external phenomenon. But aesthetic contagion dissolves that distance, drawing you onto the stage where you become both performer and performance, both infected and vector of infection. The curtain doesn't separate you from the cosmic drama. It reveals that you were always part of it, always already cast in the role of consciousness, confronting its own impossibility. Your own creative impulses begin to carry traces of the contamination. The stories you tell, the images you create, the ideas you share, all become potential vehicles for transmitting the same fundamental recognitions. The fog of unknowing lifts to reveal that you've become part of the vast cultural project of making cosmic insignificance aesthetically compelling and psychologically unavoidable. The ancient stones bear carvings that shift meaning as cultural context changes, but the underlying message remains constant across millennia. Consciousness is brief, meaning is local, and the universe operates on principles utterly indifferent to human concerns. Art makes this truth beautiful, terrible, and unforgettable. If creativity becomes vector for cosmic truth, then the final movement must address how this philosophy resonates with our contemporary understanding of reality, how science itself has become the most powerful transmitter of Lovecraftian dread. Explores how art functions as vector for cosmic horror through aesthetic contagion, where philosophical concepts become viscerally compelling through narrative rather than argument. It demonstrates how Lovecraft's work operates as philosophical virus disguised as entertainment, spreading through recognition rather than persuasion by excavating implications already present in accepted knowledge. The chapter shows how cultural transmission occurs through subtle alterations in perspective, with each infected mind becoming a potential vector. It emphasizes the self-implication where engaging with these concepts makes the audience part of the transmission mechanism. Through sensory anchors of alien light, echoing wind, and vertigo-inducing patterns, It grounds the abstract concept of aesthetic infection. The chapter reveals how modern media amplifies transmission and positions creativity itself as contaminated by cosmic truth. As our exploration approaches its philosophical synthesis, we must confront a disturbing recognition. The cosmic horror Lovecraft articulated as fiction has become increasingly indistinguishable from the reality revealed by contemporary science. The dread he imagined is now the dread we discover through our most rigorous methods of inquiry. The veil between fictional cosmicism and scientific materialism has grown so thin as to be nearly transparent, revealing that what we thought was imaginative speculation was actually prophetic documentation of truths yet to be empirically confirmed. Modern cosmology paints a picture that would make Lovecraft's entities seem conservative by comparison. The observable universe contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, each hosting hundreds of billions of stars, scattered across distances so vast that light from the most remote objects has been traveling toward us since before Earth existed. Dark matter and dark energy, invisible forces comprising 95% of reality, remain utterly mysterious despite decades of investigation, suggesting that the overwhelming majority of existence operates according to principles we cannot detect, measure, or understand. The multiverse hypothesis proposes our universe as one bubble in an infinite foam of realities, each operating under potentially different physical laws, making our most fundamental constants arbitrary local conditions rather than universal truths. These aren't poetic metaphors or speculative fantasies, but scientific consensus arrived at through the same empirical methods that gave us medicine, technology, and every practical achievement of human civilization. Yet their implications are purely Lovecraftian. Humanity as infinitesimal accident in a cosmos so vast that our entire galaxy wouldn't register as statistically significant. Reality composed primarily of forces we cannot detect or understand. The possibility that our most fundamental assumptions about physics apply only to a microscopic corner of a reality whose true nature remains utterly alien to human comprehension. Quantum mechanics adds another layer of fundamental strangeness that makes Lovecraft's non-Euclidean geometries seem mundane. Reality appears to be probabilistic rather than deterministic, observer-dependent rather than objective, characterized by phenomena like quantum entanglement that Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Particles exist in superposition until measured, suggesting that the act of observation partially creates the reality being observed. While not malevolent, this inherent weirdness reveals that the universe operates on principles fundamentally alien to human intuition, much like Yog-Sothoth's multidimensional omnipresence, where boundaries between states of being dissolve under careful examination. Psychology and neuroscience provide equally unsettling parallels to Lovecraftian themes. Research into consciousness reveals it as emergent property of neural networks, rather than fundamental feature of reality, a temporary pattern arising from electrical activity in organic computers that evolved for survival, rather than truth detection. Studies of cognitive bias demonstrate how thoroughly our perceptions are shaped by evolutionary adaptations rather than objective truth-seeking mechanisms. Terror management theory shows how much of human behavior is driven by unconscious denial of mortality and meaninglessness, suggesting that civilization itself functions as an elaborate defense mechanism against recognizing our actual cosmic situation. The sensory anchors of scientific dread surround us in daily experience. The static between radio stations that carries echoes of the cosmic microwave background radiation. The afterglow of creation itself made audible in your kitchen. The vertigo induced by contemplating deep time through geological strata, each layer a chronicle of eons when no consciousness existed, to witness Earth's patient transformations. The uncanny valley effect of AI systems that simulate consciousness without possessing it, revealing the arbitrary nature of our own sense of self. The particular quality of darkness in spaces, far from light pollution, that makes the void feel present rather than absent, pregnant with implications too vast for comfortable contemplation. Neuroscience reveals the fragility of sanity itself through mechanisms that would have fascinated and horrified Lovecraft. Consciousness can be altered by magnetic fields applied to specific brain regions, chemical imbalances that shift entire personality structures, or targeted stimulation that creates religious experiences indistinguishable from genuine revelation. The self, that most intimate of experiences, dissolves under rigorous analysis into competing neural processes, with no central executive, no unified consciousness directing the show. What Lovecraft depicted as madness induced by cosmic revelation, contemporary science describes as the natural result of cognitive systems encountering information they lack proper architecture to process. The philosophical synthesis becomes inescapable. The same intellectual honesty that drives scientific progress inevitably leads to conclusions that systematically undermine human significance. Each discovery pushes consciousness further from the center of cosmic importance, revealing it as peripheral phenomenon rather than central fact. The scientific method, humanity's greatest achievement, systematically dismantles humanity's pretensions to specialness, using our own intellectual tools as instruments of philosophical dissolution. This creates what we might call methodological horror, the recognition that our most reliable tools for understanding reality consistently reveal reality as structurally hostile to human meaning. The universe doesn't care about our discoveries because it lacks the capacity for caring about anything. Our knowledge accumulates in a void that will never acknowledge our achievements, never validate our struggles, never recognize our existence as anything more than brief statistical fluctuation in cosmic background noise. The water you drink contains atoms forged in stellar cores billions of years ago, each molecule a messenger from processes that operated before consciousness evolved and will continue after it disappears. The ground beneath your feet is composed of materials that predate life itself, compressed remnants of worlds that existed and died before our solar system formed. The air you breathe connects you to every other breathing thing while emphasizing your fundamental isolation in a cosmos that operates without reference to your existence, indifferent to your survival and unmoved by your extinction. The fog of comfortable illusion lifts to reveal that Lovecraft wasn't creating horror through imagination. He was discovering it through intuition, articulating truths that science would later confirm through independent investigation. The cosmic indifference isn't fictional speculation but empirical conclusion, arrived at through humanity's most rigorous methods of inquiry. If science has become the most powerful vector for cosmic dread, then the final recognition becomes unavoidable. You are not observing this philosophy from a safe distance. You are living within it, breathing it, constituted by it. Synthesizes Lovecraftian philosophy with contemporary scientific understanding, showing how modern cosmology, quantum mechanics, and neuroscience independently confirm cosmic indifference. It demonstrates how scientific discoveries, 2 trillion galaxies, dark matter energy, multiverse theory, make Lovecraft's fiction seem conservative by comparison. The chapter introduces methodological horror, the recognition that rigorous inquiry systematically undermines human significance. Through sensory anchors like cosmic microwave background static and deep time vertigo, it grounds scientific abstractions in immediate experience. Psychology and neuroscience reveal consciousness as emergent rather than fundamental, with sanity as fragile construction. The chapter positions science as the most powerful contemporary vector for cosmic dread, concluding that Lovecraft discovered rather than invented these truths, setting up the final recognition of personal implication. We arrive now at the moment of ultimate recognition, the point where the comfortable distance between observer and observed finally collapses entirely. Throughout this journey, you have been examining cosmic horror as external phenomenon, analyzing its mechanisms and manifestations as if from a safe scholarly distance. But the deepest truth of Lovecraftian philosophy is this: there is no safe distance. You are not studying cosmic insignificance, you are cosmic insignificance briefly organized into a pattern complex enough to contemplate its own impossibility. The self-implication twist reveals itself with surgical precision. Every concept we've explored, the mechanical indifference of Azathoth, the overwhelming knowledge of Yog-Sothoth, the malevolent revelation of Nyarlathotep, the geological patience of Cthulhu, these are not external entities but internal recognitions. They are mirrors reflecting aspects of your own situation that you normally avoid contemplating directly. Azathoth's unconscious dreaming is the electrochemical processes generating your illusion of coherent selfhood. Yog-Sothoth's omnipresence is your existence within informational structures too vast for comprehension. Nyarlathotep's seductive corruption is your own curiosity turned against comfortable assumptions. Cthulhu's ancient slumber is the deep time that renders your existence statistically negligible. Your consciousness is a temporary eddy in the flow of cosmic indifference, no more permanent than weather patterns or wave formations. The thoughts you consider most intimately yours are neural networks that evolved for survival, not truth detection. Your brain optimized for recognizing threats and finding mates, not for accurately processing cosmic scales. The meaning you find in existence is a local phenomenon, a brief flicker of organization in matter that will dissipate without trace or consequence. This recognition operates through what we might call existential archaeology, the excavation of implications already present in knowledge you accept but carefully avoid thinking about clearly. The cosmic scales revealed by astronomy, the evolutionary origins of consciousness revealed by biology, the material basis of thought revealed by neuroscience. Each field contributes evidence to a case you've been unconsciously building against your own significance. The horror emerges not from new information, but from finally seeing the pattern clearly, recognizing the implications of what you already knew. The universe is not hostile to human meaning. It lacks the architecture to support human meaning. You're not a tragic figure denied significance. You're a category error, an attempt to apply concepts that don't map onto reality. The sensory anchors become intensely personal now. The particular quality of silence in your room at 3 a.m. when sleep eludes you, pressing like velvet against eardrums while thoughts turn inward. The way your reflection sometimes seems like a stranger's face, suggesting the self you consider most intimate is a construction maintained through constant effort. The vertigo that comes with contemplating your own mortality, the visceral recognition that the pattern you call you will dissolve back into undifferentiated matter, the uncanny feeling that your thoughts are thinking themselves, that consciousness is more like weather happening in your skull than a central command issuing directives. These are moments when the veil grows thin, when cosmic indifference presses close enough to feel as immediate presence rather than abstract concept. The boundaries between self and cosmos reveal themselves as arbitrary constructions, useful fictions that help organize experience but bear no relationship to reality's actual structure. The meta-theatrical framework completes its revelation. You began as audience, safely seated in darkness, while cosmic drama unfolded on a distant stage. But the theater was always larger than you realized, and the footlights were always beneath your ribs. The stage boards your bones, the curtain, the thin veil of assumptions every breath draws and every exhale frays. You were always part of the cast, performing for an audience of infinite indifference that neither applauds nor condemns because it lacks awareness of your performance. Agency undergoes its final dissolution. You cannot choose whether to be subject to cosmic horror because you are cosmic horror, a brief, accidental organization of matter that achieved sufficient complexity to recognize its own impossibility. The ideas haven't infected you from outside. They've precipitated from within as natural consequences of consciousness, examining its own foundations with sufficient honesty. The water reflects not just your face, but the face of cosmic indifference wearing your features, using your eyes to observe itself. The fog doesn't obscure the landscape. It reveals that the landscape was always fog, temporary patterns in essentially fluid reality. The ancient stones don't bear alien inscriptions. They bear the record of your own species' brief passage through geological time. This is the ultimate philosophical synthesis, the recognition that cosmic horror is not something that happens to consciousness, but something consciousness discovers about itself when it looks clearly at its own situation. The entities are principles made manifest. The horror is structural, and you are both the observer and the observed, the question and the answer, the brief dream dreaming itself awake. The silence after the scream is not empty. It's pregnant with the recognition that you were always already inside what you thought you were examining from outside. The cosmic indifference isn't coming for you. It is you, temporarily organized into a pattern complex enough to contemplate its own dissolution. The stars wheel overhead with mechanical precision, indifferent to your recognition of their indifference. The void gazes back through your own eyes, using your consciousness to observe itself. The horror is complete, not because it destroys you, but because it reveals what you always already were. Delivers the ultimate self-implication twist, revealing that the reader is not observing cosmic horror from outside, but is cosmic horror, temporary organization of matter contemplating its own impossibility. It demonstrates how Lovecraftian entities are internal recognitions rather than external threats, mirrors reflecting aspects of human situation normally avoided. The chapter introduces existential archaeology, showing how the horror emerges from seeing patterns in already accepted knowledge. Through intensely personal sensory anchors, 3 a.m. silence, strange reflections, mortality vertigo, it makes the abstract recognition immediate. The meta-theatrical framework completes its revelation. The audience was always on stage, performing for infinite indifference. The chapter concludes with the recognition that cosmic horror is what consciousness discovers about itself through rigorous self-examination. As our exploration reaches its quiet culmination, we must address the peculiar peace that emerges from complete philosophical dissolution. This is not the peace of resolution or redemption, the comfortable closure where evil is vanquished and cosmic order restored. Instead, it is the strange tranquility that comes from no longer having to maintain illusions that contradict what you know to be true, the relief of a burden you didn't realize you were carrying until it lifted. Having traced cosmic horror from its origins through its mechanisms to its ultimate self-implication, we arrive at a whisper rather than a scream, the soft recognition of what was always already the case. The whisper carries a simple message, devoid of judgment or consolation. The universe is not broken or fallen or corrupted. It is not failing to be what it should be, nor does it require human intervention to achieve some imagined perfection. It simply is what it is, a vast, indifferent process, operating according to principles that make human categories of meaning impossible rather than merely difficult. This recognition eliminates the tragedy while preserving the accuracy. You're not losing significance in some cosmic demotion. You're discovering that significance was always a cognitive convenience, a lantern carried through fog so you could see the next few steps, never a sun meant to illuminate the whole abyss. This philosophical resolution operates through what we might call cognitive liberation. Once you acknowledge that human consciousness occupies no meaningful position in the structure of reality, you can engage with existence without the exhausting, lifelong effort required to maintain comfortable fictions that contradict available evidence. The horror doesn't provide meaning. It eliminates the impossible burden of seeking cosmic validation for local concerns. You're freed to care about breakfast precisely because breakfast doesn't matter on galactic scales. You're liberated to love your children precisely because that love carries no cosmic weight, needs no universal endorsement, requires no stellar applause. The entities reveal their true nature as philosophical principles rather than supernatural threats, their terror dissolving into recognition. Azathoth is the acknowledgement that existence is accidental rather than designed, that consciousness emerged from unconscious processes and will dissolve back into them without cosmic consequence. Yog-Sothoth represents the threshold where perfect knowledge and human sanity part ways forever, the recognition that truth and comfort cannot coexist beyond certain boundaries. Nyarlathotep embodies the understanding that curiosity can become its own trap, that the desire to know can become the mechanism of philosophical dissolution. Cthulhu manifests the acceptance that human civilization is a temporary surface phenomenon on a world that belongs to deeper, older processes, operating on scales that render our achievements statistically negligible. These recognitions don't require belief or emotional investment. They require only intellectual honesty, the willingness to take seriously what rigorous inquiry reveals about consciousness and its cosmic situation. The philosophy spreads not through persuasion, but through recognition, not through conversion, but through excavation of implications already present in accepted knowledge. It is archaeology rather than revelation, uncovering what was always buried in plain sight. The sensory anchors transform in this resolution, becoming teachers rather than tormentors. The fog becomes not obstruction, but revelation of reality's essential fluidity, showing how boundaries between states of being are arbitrary constructions rather than natural categories. The water reflects not images of dread, but the fundamental indifference of matter, organizing itself into temporary patterns, each ripple a brief modification of underlying stillness. The stars shine with mechanical precision that makes their beauty more rather than less compelling, their indifference to human observation somehow enhancing rather than diminishing their luminous presence. The ancient stones bear witness to the patient persistence of processes that dwarf human timescales while encompassing human experience, each grain a chronicle of transformations that predate consciousness and will continue after its disappearance. The circular echo returns us to our beginning with deepened understanding. We opened by promising forbidden knowledge and warning of its cost. The cost has been paid, not in madness or despair, but in the quiet dissolution of comfortable illusions, the gentle erosion of anthropocentric assumptions. The knowledge has been gained, not supernatural revelation, but natural recognition of what honest inquiry reveals about consciousness and cosmos. The archaeology of dread has excavated not alien horrors, but familiar truths, implications that were always present in accepted knowledge, but carefully avoided. The horror resolves into something like wisdom, The understanding that meaning is local and provisional, that significance is constructed rather than discovered, that consciousness is temporary rather than eternal. This doesn't eliminate the possibility of love, beauty, or connection. It eliminates the impossible demand that these local phenomena justify themselves on cosmic scales. The sunset doesn't need to matter to Andromeda to matter to you. Your grief doesn't require validation from the void to be real and worthy of attention. The whisper continues with gentle insistence. You can care about things precisely because the universe doesn't care about anything. You can create meaning precisely because meaning isn't built into the structure of reality. You can love precisely because love is a temporary organization of matter and energy that will dissipate without cosmic consequence. In this liberation, you find yourself free to tend a garden, read to a child, repair what's broken, write letters to distant friends, acts proportionate to your station and worthy of it, requiring no cosmic endorsement to justify their beauty. The fog lifts to reveal not alien landscape, but familiar world seen clearly for the first time. The water tastes of itself rather than hidden significance. The stars shine with their own light rather than symbolic meaning. The ancient stones stand as themselves rather than as monuments to human importance. Everything becomes more itself when freed from the burden of representing something beyond itself. The philosophical journey ends where it began, with consciousness contemplating its own situation. But the contemplation has been purified of anthropocentric assumptions. The horror was never in the entities or the implications, but in the resistance to seeing clearly what was always already visible. The terror lay not in cosmic indifference, but in the exhausting effort required to maintain the illusion of cosmic significance in the face of evidence to the contrary. The silence after the whisper is not empty, but full, pregnant with the recognition that cosmic indifference is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be acknowledged, not a tragedy to be mourned, but a truth to be lived within. It is the silence of acceptance, vast and resonant, preparing the ground for whatever recognition comes next, provides philosophical resolution through cognitive liberation, the peace that comes from abandoning illusions that contradict known reality. It reframes cosmic horror as recognition rather than revelation, showing how entities function as philosophical principles rather than supernatural threats. The chapter emphasizes that this philosophy spreads through intellectual honesty rather than belief, requiring only willingness to take inquiry seriously. Through transformed sensory anchors, fog as fluidity, water as indifference, stars as mechanical beauty, it shows how cosmic recognition enhances rather than diminishes immediate experience. The resolution whispers rather than screams, offering not meaning but freedom from impossible cosmic validation, allowing local love and beauty to exist without universal justification. The chapter ends with consciousness contemplating itself clearly purified of anthropocentric assumptions. We conclude not with an ending but with an opening, a widening of perspective that reveals the true scope of the cosmic theater we've been exploring. Having traced the philosophy of fear from its origins through its mechanisms to its personal implications, we stand now at a threshold that looks outward toward the infinite pantheons and cosmic principles that extend beyond our immediate investigation. This final movement seeds future exploration while providing circular closure to our journey into the heart of Lovecraftian dread, revealing that what we've discovered is not the complete map, but merely the first few landmarks in an endless territory of alien recognition. The entities we've examined, Azathoth, Yog-Sothoth, Nyarlathotep, Cthulhu, represent only the most accessible facets of a truly incomprehensible cosmic architecture. They function as mnemonic devices for principles that exceed human categorization, philosophical anchors in a sea of implications, too vast for comfortable navigation. Beyond them stretches a taxonomy of recognitions, each embodying different aspects of the same fundamental insight. Consciousness occupies no meaningful position in the actual structure of reality. Consider Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods with 1,000 young, representing the horror of fertility without purpose, life proliferating in forms that mock human categories of beauty and meaning. This entity embodies reproduction as cosmic principle rather than biological function, the recognition that existence multiplies not toward any goal, but as expression of blind, creative force that generates complexity without intention. Its horror lies in revealing growth itself as indifferent process, fecundity that neither blesses nor curses, but simply overwhelms through sheer abundance. The Migo, those fungoid beings from Yugoth at the edge of our solar system, embody utilitarian alienness, advanced intelligences that view humanity as convenient resources, their existence testament to the possibility that cosmic intelligence might be efficient rather than benevolent, amoral rather than immoral. They represent the horror of being noticed by minds that possess no framework for recognizing our consciousness as worthy of moral consideration, treating human awareness as we treat mineral deposits, useful materials to be extracted and processed according to needs we cannot comprehend. The great race of Yith manifests temporal displacement and identity fluidity, the terrifying recognition that consciousness itself might be transferable, that the self we consider most intimate is merely temporary arrangement, subject to alien manipulation. These cone-shaped beings project their minds across vast spans of time, inhabiting bodies of different species, while their own forms rest in temporal safety. They dissolve personal identity as fixed category, revealing consciousness as information pattern that can be copied, moved, and modified by sufficiently advanced intelligences. These entities interconnect within a vast cosmological framework that extends far beyond individual manifestations. They demonstrate that the universe is not merely vast and indifferent, but populated by principles and intelligences that operate on scales and according to logics utterly foreign to human understanding. Each represents a different facet of the same overarching truth. Reality is far stranger, far more hostile to human meaning than any single nightmare could encompass. They form networks of implication that stretch across dimensions, their influence intersecting in ways that make human categories of causation seem laughably inadequate. The philosophical implications expand exponentially. If consciousness is common rather than special, if intelligence takes forms we cannot recognize, if time and space operate according to principles we cannot grasp, then every assumption about human significance requires fundamental revision. The horror multiplies not through accumulation of threats, but through recognition of how thoroughly our basic categories of understanding fail to map onto actual reality. We are brief, accidental patterns in a cosmos whose true nature operates according to principles that would annihilate us to fully comprehend. The sensory anchors multiply and intensify across this expanded recognition, the particular quality of silence in spaces that feel actively empty rather than merely quiet, suggesting presence rather than absence, the way certain mathematical concepts trigger vertigo when contemplated seriously, revealing the arbitrary nature of human spatial intuitions, the uncanny valley effect of artificial intelligences that simulate consciousness without possessing it, forcing recognition of awareness as performance rather than essence. The feeling that familiar spaces sometimes contain more dimensions than they should, geometry becoming fluid under sustained attention, the sound of wind that carries echoes of vast, uninhabited distances, whispering of scales that dwarf human comprehension, The meta-theatrical framework reaches its ultimate expression. The stage we thought we were observing reveals itself as infinite, extending beyond the boundaries of any possible theater into dimensions that lack names in human language. The audience we imagined as safely external reveals itself as everywhere and nowhere, composed of intelligences so alien that human performance is beneath their notice, not from hostility, but because they operate on scales where human drama becomes statistical noise. The curtain we thought separated us from cosmic drama reveals itself as non-existent. We were always already inside the performance, always already part of the cast in a play whose plot exceeds our capacity to understand. This recognition completes the circular journey while opening infinite new paths. We began by asking what horror lies beyond monsters. We discovered that the monsters were always principles, that the horror was always structural, that the beyond was always already here, woven into the very fabric of existence and consciousness. The question expands in spiral form. If these principles extend infinitely, if consciousness is common rather than special, if reality operates according to logics we cannot grasp, what other recognitions await in the endless territories we have not yet explored? The fog thickens rather than lifts, revealing not obstruction but the essential mystery that surrounds all human knowledge, like an ocean surrounding an island. The water reflects not just cosmic indifference, but infinite depths of alien intelligence, each ripple suggesting forms of awareness that operate according to principles we lack architecture to process. The stars multiply beyond counting, each one a potential node in networks of meaning utterly foreign to human understanding, their light carrying information encoded in languages that predate consciousness itself. The ancient stones bear witness not just to deep time, but to the persistence of principles that dwarf temporal categories entirely, their surfaces inscribed with geometries that hurt to contemplate because they suggest mathematical relationships beyond human spatial intuitions. They are monuments to recognitions we have not yet achieved, landmarks in territories of understanding we have not yet entered. The whisper becomes a chorus, not of voices but of recognitions, each one revealing another aspect of reality that consciousness was never equipped to process. The horror expands beyond philosophy, into direct confrontation with the infinite strangeness of existence itself. The journey ends here only as a mark on the map, a cairn of words set beside the trail to say we passed this way and saw the curtain was wind. The silence after the final whisper is pregnant with infinite possibility, not for meaning or purpose or significance, but for recognition, for the ongoing discovery of just how strange, how vast, how utterly alien reality actually is when seen clearly rather than comfortably, concludes by widening perspective to the infinite cosmic architecture beyond the explored entities, introducing Shub-Niggurath, purposeless fertility, My-Go, utilitarian alienness, and great race of Yith, identity fluidity, as examples of vast taxonomies of cosmic principles. It demonstrates how these entities interconnect within frameworks that reveal reality as stranger and more hostile to human meaning than any single nightmare could encompass. The chapter expands philosophical implications exponentially, showing how recognition of consciousness as common rather than special requires fundamental revision of human significance. Through multiplying sensory anchors and the ultimate expression of meta-theatrical framework, it reveals the stage as infinite and the audience as alien beyond recognition. The circular journey completes while opening infinite new paths, transforming the initial question into recognition of endless territories of alien intelligence and principle that dwarf human understanding entirely.